Hi, everyone. We're here today with one of my favorite people, Mark Leslie. I consider him my mentor. And
Ooh. Oh, my protege, my protege.
especially, I haven't even asked your permission if I can call you my mentor, but can you,
Hey, I
will
am
you,
honored. I'm
will
honored.
you
Thank you.
be my mentor? Okay.
Yes. Will you be my mentor?
That's right.
Hello, little boys and girls. I'll be your mentor today.
That's right. We finally made it official. I've whispered about it. He's been really helpful for me. I think he's my mentor. Mark and I are both in the short story world. And in fact, we've all just listened to his very creepy and a little unsettling short story, The Shadow Men.
Ooh.
And by the way, good read. You just did
Oh,
that
thank
this
you.
morning, eh?
Yeah, yeah, I did. I did. I found an old version of it that I did on an old podcast I tried to release in like 2006. And I needed a better recording, even though the music I had used for it was way better. And I can't find the un
Un
unspoken over
yeah.
music because it's
Oh,
so great. Kevin MacLeod, I've purchased a lot of his music for various things like podcasts and stuff like that. And I actually, even though it's
oh,
royalty free, and I acknowledge him, I give him money for that because he does such a great job sharing royalty free music, and I want to support the person who's allowing us to use his stuff. So not only do I always link to his website or mention him, but I've spent money on him over the years, and I'm very proud to say I support another artist.
artists should be paid as
Yeah,
artists ourselves, trying to find
that's
our way in
right.
the world. Artists should be paid. Well, I
Yeah,
enjoyed it immensely, which is why I also, talking about the life of a short story, you will find
yeah.
the Shadow Man in my book, Mythical Monsters, which is an anthology where I bought a few stories, and I bought this one from Mark because I
Yes,
loved
I got a sale.
it.
But
That's
but the
right.
cool thing was is that was additional revenue, right? Because that was a reprint sale.
Right. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about
Yeah,
how, as a short story writer, all my followers know I'm spending all my time trying to figure out, I won't say how to make a living, but how to make our writing profitable.
right.
And
Yeah,
you've helped teach me how to repurpose stories. And I think The Shadow Man is a great example of the life
right.
short story.
Yeah, yeah. Of course. I'd love to. So the Shadow Men was originally written. This is a hardcover version of Northern Haunts, edited by Tim Deal, and he was looking for 100. It was 100 terrifying New England tales. And here's the funny thing: I had written a short story that had been published in Parsec magazine years ago. It was a professional sale to Parsec magazine, and or actually semi-pro rates, I think. That's right.
They're like three
And
cents, I think, because I've sold to them.
something, yeah, yeah. So it was
Yeah.
it was it was semi-pro rate. But still, it was a glossy magazine that was available on shelves in stores for a limited time. And it was nominated. It was shortlisted. It was on the shortlist nomination for an Aurora Award. I did not win. I lost to my good friend Rob Sawyer, of course, because that's, you know,
The
yeah, you're up
the
against
king
Rob
of
Sawyer,
sci-fi
right?
himself. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, Canadian Dean. But so in that story, I have a guy getting lost on a highway in mid-northern Ontario, Highway 144, which I'm quite familiar with because I've been on it many, many times in my youth. I grew up there. And I called them the Bush people, but it was these mythical people that existed in the shadows in the wilderness and blah, 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 blah. And it was based on a story his father told him when he was a child. And in that, what, 5,000 word, 6,000 word short story, I allude to the fact that he's scared of being alone, especially at night in the woods, because of this experience when he was a kid. And the experience he has with the kid was very similar, except for the stuff that happens in the Shadow Men. It was the father had made up the bush people around the campfire, and he couldn't sleep that night because every time he heard a loon, it was freaking him out. That was it. So I took from a story I had published and made money, I took an element of it and I went, what let's do the story of this kid. And I wrote it as if obviously I'm around a campfire. So if somebody has the little booklet I later published it in, they could read it. They could actually read it right from the page in front of a campfire as if they were talking, as if it happened to them. So that or memorize the story because it's so short. And so I not only did I make a sale to this anthology with that story, but it was based on a story within a story of another story I had sold. So it's already multi-layered and complex. And then again, I republished it in Bumps in the Night, a digital slash print slash audio chapbook. And there actually is a reading of it by Chris Humphreys. So C.C. Humphreys, the Canadian writer who is also an actor who does who does audiobooks and stuff. So I had paid him to do the audiobook. And then when you were looking for stuff, I thought, oh, this is a nice little chunk, perfect little chunk that could fit well in your collection as well, or collection slash anthology, because you did include other authors in it. So, yeah, and now, 20 years after I published my first book, One Hand Screaming, I've got the 20th anniversary edition, which is, I mean, if I can just show you the size of the original compared to
Oh,
the new
wow.
one.
Oh my
The
God.
original was 47,000 words. The new one's about 105,000 words. So there's a lot more content in it, including the Shadow Man, which appears in my I have a section of the book that has shorts, really short stories, like 1,000 words and under, and some poetry, including original poetry, a poem that I wrote called 20 Haunting Years. Because in the original book of One Hand Screaming, I have a poem called The Sound of One Man Screaming,
One
and
man's
it's a poem about me writing. And so I had to do the 20 Haunting Years. It was a poem about me thinking about me writing.
The layers just never end.
I know. So I mean, I'm constantly riffing on stuff of my own, right? My own creations. And I've even, and here's the funny thing is I took the Shadow Man. So I've already earned money off this in so many different ways over the years. I'm gonna earn more money off it, obviously, in the new book that's coming out October 2024. But I just sold a story to Lisa Mangum
It's amazing.
from
Oh,
yeah, the new anthology where she was looking for cryptids. So what I thought, oh no, wait, that's a different story. So it was a different short story, but it's a sequel to a short story, a 10,000 word story I published in 2009 or something like that.
wow.
And so I find that even within your own universe of short stories, you can return to the same characters, you can return to the same universes. So not only can you re-leverage, like sell reprint rights and use it in different formats and styles, right? Like The Shadow Man is now available as an audiobook read by Chris Humphreys. It's going to be in audiobook format again. I recorded this one specifically for your podcast, but that's something I'm probably going to include in my digital. I have a digital treasure box in my new Kickstarter, and that'll be one of the
Hey,
dozens and dozens of files that the supporters will get. Like, here you go. Here's a version of me reading, that I recorded specifically for this podcast. And that's those are the kind of goodies, and I guess re-leveraging your IP. I think Dean Wesley Smith calls it the Magic Bakery.
the Magic
Right.
Bakery. Okay, I like
Yeah,
that.
Magic Bakery, where you can go in and it's like, I'm going to take this pie, but I'm going to slice a little piece of the pie, but somehow it doesn't regenerate, but I can continually leverage some of these ingredients. So I'm constantly using some of the material that I've used before, and giving it a whole new life. Because here's the thing, Angelique. Here's the thing that's really important is when The Shadow Man was first published in Northern Haunts 100 Terrifying New England Tales, like you're a horror fan, you're a horror reader, you've never heard of this book, probably, right?
And now
It's
I
probably,
do, but now I know about it.
yeah, but it's probably, who knows if well, it was print on demand. I can tell it's print on demand from the back, but whether or not it's still available, um, most people who saw it in Bumps in the Night, and I was at a in-person event the last weekend in Bayfield, Ontario, and I specifically sold a few copies of the book because people were there camping, the last
Right.
weekend of summer, and they're camping. And I was like, what, like, I like scary stories. I'm like, well, do you want to have some stories to read around the campfire tonight? Like to scare other people? I'm like, this, you're going to love this one. And sold it specifically there. So again, just because it's been published somewhere doesn't mean that everyone who's the possible audience could possibly have seen it and read it. So you are bringing it to new readers all the time. And that's one of the other important elements about being a writer is chances are most of the world hasn't read your story yet.
That's true. That's true.
Chances are pretty likely you've never heard of me and you've never heard of my fiction. So I see that as an opportunity, rather than something to bemoan. No, everyone's heard of Stephen King, but they've never heard of Mark Leslie. Well, that means there's more opportunity for people to hear about Mark Leslie then.
Absolutely. Even with this, we keep growing. I mean, they're growing small. And I must say, I do get discouraged because you're like, okay, you work so hard and so few people see things. But even your Shadowman now, so this podcast episode that we're doing right
Yeah,
now, and the fact that you read this story, I
yeah,
am now going to leverage this reading as well, as long as you agree, and put it
yeah.
in the audio version of Mythical Monsters
Of course, yeah.
because I just figured, I mean, it was
Yes,
morning.
you definitely have my permission. You have already paid for the story already, which was
That's right.
fantastic. I
And I
love that.
did have you sign your audio rights away for
Yeah, yeah, I know. But even if I hadn't, we're recording this now. I give you permission to
yes.
put it in the
two
because here's
two
the
official
thing.
things today. You're my mentor officially, and now I officially can put Shadow Men in my next audiobook.
But my blessing with that is that means more people are going to hear it, and that could lead to more people going, "Oh, this who's this Mark Leslie character? It's not bad, right?"
Exactly.
And so that could lead to who knows what that could lead to. I mean, I've sold books. I was on a podcast. It was kind of like 12 years earlier. I was on a podcast called the Writing Show Podcast with Paula B. And I was talking about wanting to write a book called The Canadian Werewolf in New York. And I was going to do it for NaNoWriMo. And we ended up, I didn't get it done. I only got 30,000 words done. And then we went on for 13 episodes over the course of a year where I just kept coming up with every excuse in the book why I couldn't write it. And it was what, maybe 6 or 7 years ago, I was at a brewery event. I pop up, I had a little tent and I was selling books outside a brewery. They had like a little mini market with, vendors and people selling vegetables and fruits and vegetables and other crafts and stuff like that. And somebody came by and went, "Oh my God, you finished the book." And it was somebody I'd never met. She goes, "The only reason I remember listening to the podcast because you were from Hamilton and I'm from Hamilton, and I thought that was so cool because I wanted to write and you were a writer." And she goes, "You finished the book," and she bought the book immediately because she
Oh,
was
that's
so excited
awesome.
because 12 years earlier or whatever, when I was on this podcast, I was talking about a book I wanted to write and I didn't publish till 2016.
See,
So
that's insane. You are touch
yeah,
people. There are people out there listening, you
people
know?
pay attention and I think a lot of us focus so much, especially in this digital world, focus so much on looking on our Amazon dashboard and go, "Well, today I haven't sold anything yet," and we're all verklempt about it.
That's every day.
But that's the thing is we spend so much time thinking about that instant gratification and not enough time thinking about, again, I'll quote a mutual friend of ours, James Owen, and say that all of the choices you make are cumulative and a lot of them build upon and lead upon those successes in the future, depending, upon following your passion. And I think there's something to that, but it's really hard to measure when it's not, "Oh, I put up an ad and I paid this much money for it and I got this many clicks and I sold that much." You can't measure that woman from Hamilton a dozen years earlier hearing me talk about why I couldn't finish this novel and then remembering 12 years later, "Oh my God, that's the guy for the werewolf novel," and
That's
buying it. You can't measure that stuff. But I think there's something profound in the long-term effect you can have by not giving up on yourself and pursuing those dreams and getting your content out there in as many different formats and guises as possible.
and not giving up. I think that's the biggest. You know, many times I wanted to give up on this podcast because, as you know, because you have one too,
Yeah.
Dark Reflections, which I listen to. Everyone out there, check out Mark's podcast too. I really freaking enjoy it. The last one on pivoting, I needed to hear exactly at the time you had it
Oh,
out
good.
there. But
And
anyway,
you've had to pivot.
I I'm pivoting like I'm a dancer, and I'm a terrible
Yeah.
dancer. I've had to pivot left, right, and center. Um,
Dance like nobody's judging.
there you go. Dance like nobody's judging. Um, uh, anyway, I've tried to give up, but then it's been so useful. For example, when I just put out my recent audiobook, Kirsten Creepy, and I
Yeah.
just somehow got it up on Audible, passed all those. I did it by myself. I didn't pay
Yeah.
anybody. I didn't pay Find Away Voices. I didn't pay anybody. I did
Yeah.
it myself and managed to pass all their extremely stringent audio controls. And it's out there. And 4 people have bought it. I don't know who
See,
those
that's
4 people
fantastic.
are.
Think about that. 4 people said this looks cool and they tried it out. That's pretty amazing. If 4 new people are discovering you.
Exactly. But here's the thing.
Or they know who you are and they know they like you, so they bought it.
Exactly. And it's
Either way, you
all
win.
at the right time. But the interesting part is so all the stories in Cursed and Creepy were podcast episodes. So they
Right.
were stories that I wrote, or stories like this where I had the author read their story. So I
Yeah.
already had all the audio. All I had to do was fiddle with the levels and upload it to
Yeah.
ACS, which is the Audible creation platform.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
done. So by you doing this story for me today, I am now going to have one more piece of audio that's going to work towards the next audiobook that I'm going to put out.
Yeah.
So it's worth not quitting because you never know. Like you said, you don't know what your effect is. You don't know what the accumulation is of all your little tiny blocks. And you think you're building a staircase to nowhere, which is how
Yeah.
I feel most of the time. So
Yes.
I'm on a
I
journey
understand
down
that.
a dark path to nowhere. But then you're like, oh, I actually am somewhere. I produce this, and there's the tiniest little bit of leverage or growth. I mean, you're living the dream, I feel, because you are a full-time author. You have enough irons in the fire that you can support yourself with what you love.
Of course, but it took 40 years, right? It's not something I did overnight, right?
But you
It's
got
not like
there.
one day I woke up and all of a sudden it all right. It was like this long, slow build. But again, I think I'm lucky that I haven't had an overnight breakaway success, because had I had an overnight breakaway success, I would have incorrectly thought the one thing I did just before it happened was the thing I can go and sell to a million other writers and go, if you do this, you can be rich like me. And the reality is, luck is one of the biggest factors that nobody takes into account. I've seen, and I consult with so many different authors, and I see authors doing all the right things, looking at all the things they're doing. It's like I can't find an error in what you're doing. The one thing that hasn't happened is you haven't had the luck after putting all that effort and all that work into it. You're doing your craft, you're continuing to get better at it, you're continually doing better business, making solid business decisions, you're putting out a consistent brand, whatever. The one thing that hasn't happened is you haven't had that weird lucky strike. And I know it sounds weird, but I'm so glad I haven't had a ridiculously, over the moon lucky strike. I've had really good luck, and I've had some really good solid, I would call, successes. Nothing major, nothing that's putting me in, flying first class wherever I need to go and stuff like that. But they've been moderate enough successes that I continue to work at them and I continue to build, and I don't go, oh, okay, I've made it. I can stop. And I think I'm lucky that I've had the slow, small successes like the short stories and stuff like that, because it's allowed me to continue to not give up, because I can see the long-term effect of what that means,
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
makes perfect sense. Here, quick story. I got a rejection the other day. I sent to a magazine. They're like, you're just not our demographic. You have to live in Quebec and you have to be under 21.
And you don't live in Quebec.
I'm not under 21. And but he goes, but on another hand, I absolutely love your blog. I follow it religiously and I love what you do.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Oh, okay,
You
Randy.
got a rejection with a really great compliment. It's like, I'm sorry, but you're not under 21 and you don't live in Quebec. It's like, that's the worst.
Yeah. And I thought that was pretty good. So here, I want to talk to you about how you spend all your time, not all your time, but you set up your pop-up tents, you go to all these cons, you have tables and you pile them with your books and you sit there. I have a
Yeah.
block. I have a block about doing that. I'm
Yeah.
afraid if I spend $80 for a table at DreadCon, there's no hope in hell I'm going to make back my gas and
Yeah.
and the cost of the table. I'm going to be
Yeah.
way in the hole, and then I'm going to have to sit still for that many hours, which I'm not very good at.
You're not good at sitting still. Yeah. I'll be honest with you. Those are hit and miss, right? At half of them, I don't make my money back,
Right.
but I don't know which one it's going to be. But here's the other thing, and I did this with it was Frightmare in the Falls a few years ago.
Nightmares in the
Uh,
Fall. I love that name.
Frightmare in the Falls, which is a big con in Niagara Falls, Ontario. And I think when I calculated the cost of my table, the fact that I had to stay in a hotel room for 2 nights, the fact that I'd hired my stepdaughter to come in on the Saturday to help at my booth because I needed a break for the long day. I think I earned about $1,500 in sales or whatever. After the calculations of what my cost of the merchandise was and all my costs. But my costs were probably $1,300, $1,400. So I barely made $100 from this 3-day weekend. It's a lot of work for $100. I mean, I can do a 1 hour consult virtually from my home for $149 US. So
Right.
$100 Canadian for a 3-day weekend of work seems like a waste of time. And I remember talking to my partner Liz about it. And she goes, "Well, that was a hell of a lot of work for nothing." And I said, "No, here's the thing. I did make a little bit of money. I worked really, really hard for it. But I got to interact with and engage with so many different people who were fans of the kind of stuff that I write. I even had somebody show up in a werewolf costume who had read my Canadian werewolf books,
I
showed
love
up,
that.
did not buy a single thing from me at the booth, but that's okay. This person had purchased my hardcover versions on Amazon or wherever, had brought them in for me to sign, and we took a picture together. And
Nice.
so it was not necessarily about selling right then and there. It's about creating an experience for people. So, and I did have some people who, follow my author newsletter and said, "I came because you said you were going to be here and I wanted to meet you." That's fantastic.
I
So
love
it's
that.
part of this long-term brand building. So even had I lost two or $300 on that weekend or whatever it was, I probably still created some memories and I still created author branding and I still built my brand in a way that's probably going to help me in the long term. Again, how can I measure it? I can't. I'm only going on gut instinct and how it feels. But I could also spend $300 on an Amazon ad and at the end of the ad have $300 less in my pocket, whether or not I made my money back. What I've created here are real life, physical, tangible memories. And a whole whack of people walked away with signed copies of my books that now are out there in the world.
And they might buy your next one, right?
And they may buy my next one, or they may leave it on a coffee table, or a friend sees it when they're at their house and goes, "Oh, who's this? And you want to borrow it? I don't, great, borrow the book and read it," because suddenly new people are discovering me. Because physical books, unlike ebooks, physical books are products that can be passed along and handed down and touched and seen. And somebody reading, reading a book on the bus or subway, this is way better than an ebook because they can see the cover of what
Right.
the person's reading. So anyway, but the challenge I think with those events is, oh my God, and I'm not good at this. I am not good at selling. But what I am good at is storytelling.
Right.
And so I try to have a little bit of fun with it. And I forgot to pack it last weekend, but I usually have a sign that says "Ghost Stories Told Here." It's a bat shaped sign. "Ghost Stories Told Here," and I usually hang it on the front of my tent. It's an icebreaker. People come up and go, "Ooh, ghost stories, tell me one." Bam, right there.
You
I
got
don't have to
them.
do anything but respond, which is, as an
Right.
introvert, great. I'm good at responding. I'm not good at breaking the ice.
Right.
So that's part of what I do. The other thing I do is usually as people are looking at the books, and I have quite a few different books, the true ghost story books and the urban fantasy and the horror and stuff like that. And usually I jokingly say, "Hey, are there any lies I can tell you about some of my books?" But
Uh-huh.
usually just that opening line, because then people come up and they go, "These are all yours?" Because they think I'm a bookstore. I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, they're all mine." It's like, "Oh my God, that's a lot of books." I'm like, "Well, I've been at it for 40 years." So I've had some time. I've had some time. So again, I'm not comfortable doing it, but I become comfortable when I put on the right hat.
Right.
Storyteller, entertainer. That's what I'm here for.
That makes sense. So let's talk about hardcover books. What's really interesting about your Kickstarter right now is you have art in this particular edition, correct?
Yeah, yeah. So I commissioned it was $1,000 US for original artwork, specifically for each section of the book. So it's broken down into different sections and themes like Halloween stories and etc. And in the regular trade edition, it's just going to be a standard one page. Because again, I had to. This is going in traditional distribution, so I had to know what the page count was because I needed to know what the cost was, so I could give the 50% through the distribution channel and all of that. Blah 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 blah. So I had to limit myself to 380 pages in order to afford it.
Right.
With the hardcover edition, which is not going through that standard, traditional distribution method in a warehouse here in Canada, I can make it longer. So I can do the full 2-page spreads. And in the deluxe edition that I'm having printed here locally in Kitchener-Waterloo, is it's full color spreads, and I can add more pages to it.
Gorgeous.
So there's going to be additional artwork and additional content, like the inside flaps are going to have art, like original artwork from my cover designer as well as this other designer, and even a combination of art that they kind of collaborated. Well, didn't collaborate together, but I took the one art and asked my designer to add stuff to it.
I get
um,
illogically excited by art. So everybody check out Mark's Kickstarter. It's only up for another couple days, and it's your
yeah,
chance to get some pretty cool things. But
yes, thank you so much.
I don't definitely keep in mind. So why don't you let our listeners know where they can find you again?
You can find out everything you need to know about me and more over at markleslie.ca.
Okay, sounds good. Well, thank you today, Mark.